I didn't mean to end up in the abandoned hospital that night. I was driving through back roads, a mistake made during one of those ill-fated arguments with my girlfriend. I need to clear my head, I had said, slamming the door behind me. The GPS was out, and I only noticed the hospital when the beam of my headlights swept across its crumbling facade. It looked like it hadn't seen a patient in decades. The words St. Malachi Asylum were etched above the main doors, faded but still legible. I could have just turned around, could have ignored the pull that drew me toward its yawning entrance. But the chill that slithered down my spine wasn't enough to override the curiosity boiling in my chest. I told myself it was for the story. Something to tell at parties, maybe. The air inside was thick and stale, clinging to my skin like cobwebs. My flashlight cast long, jittery shadows as I moved through the lobby. The furniture was overturned, the walls streaked with water damage and something darker that I prayed wasn't blood. A sign hanging by a single rusted chain listed the floors: admissions, psychiatry, children's ward, morgue. Why I thought the children's ward would be less horrifying, I'll never know. The hallway stretched before me like an open throat. The wallpaper peeled in jagged strips, exposing mold-blackened walls beneath. Rooms lined the corridor, their doors hanging open like broken jaws. I thought I heard a faint sound, laughter, high and childlike. I froze, my breath fogging in the cold air. It must have been the wind. Had to be. As I stepped into one of the rooms, the floor creaked ominously. A child's bed sat in the corner, its metal frame warped with rust. Above it, someone had scrawled words in a messy, looping hand. They never left. A chill crawled up my spine, prickling the back of my neck. I turned to leave, but a sound stopped me, soft, shuffling footsteps echoing down the hallway. My flashlight trembled in my grip as I swung the beam toward the noise. Nothing. Just the empty corridor staring back at me. But the laughter came again. This time closer. I bolted. The hall seemed endless as I ran, the sound of footsteps multiplying, chasing me. I turned a corner, nearly slipping on the damp floor, and found myself in a large open space, a playroom. Dust-covered toys were scattered across the floor, a broken rocking horse, a doll missing its eyes, a tiny red ball that rolled to a stop against my boot. The laughter erupted into a cacophony, high-pitched and echoing. My flashlight flickered. In the strobe of light, I saw them, shapes barely visible in the shadows. Tiny figures with hollow eyes and mouths stretched too wide. Their limbs jerked unnaturally as they crept toward me. "No," I whispered, my voice trembling. "This isn't real." But the stench hit me then, a sickly sweet rot that churned my stomach. I gagged as the figures came closer, their whispering voices slithering into my ears. "Stay with us," they hissed. "We're so lonely." I turned and fled back into the hall. Every door slammed shut as I passed, the sound like gunshots in the oppressive silence. The laughter turned to screams, angry, desperate, hungry. I don't know how I made it back to the lobby. My legs felt like lead, my chest tight with panic. As I burst through the main doors into the night, the cold air hit me like a slap. I ran to my car, fumbling with the keys, my hands shaking so hard I could barely fit them into the lock. When the engine roared to life, I didn't look back. I couldn't. But as I sped away, the headlights illuminated something in the rearview mirror, figures standing in the doorway of the hospital, their hollow eyes glowing faintly in the dark. It wasn't until I got home that I realized I still had the red ball. It sat in the passenger seat, pristine despite the dust and decay of that place. I've tried to throw it away, burn it, even bury it. But every morning, it's there, waiting for me. And now, the whispers have started in my house. "Stay with us," they say. "We're so lonely." I've been trying to convince myself it's stress, or maybe a bad dream. The kind you wake up from, sweating and heart pounding, but with no real consequences. Except this isn't a dream. The ball is real. The whispers are real. And every time I think they've stopped, they come back louder. Last night, I tried leaving the house. I drove for hours, taking random turns until I was sure I'd lose whatever tethered me to that cursed place. I parked at a cheap motel, the kind where the flickering neon sign is as tired as the receptionist. But the ball was waiting for me. I walked into the room, and there it was, sitting on the bed like it had been expecting me. My heart dropped into my stomach, bow rising in my throat. I grabbed it with trembling hands, threw it into the hallway, and slammed the door shut. For a moment, I thought it was over. Then came the knocking. At first, it was soft, almost polite, like a child asking permission to enter. But it grew louder, more insistent. Bang! 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 I backed away from the door, my breath hitching in my chest. "Stay with us," a voice called from the other side. It was high and sweet, like a child's, but the words dragged like nails over broken glass. When I didn't answer, the banging stopped. Silence pressed down on the room, heavy and suffocating. Then I heard the ball rolling across the floor behind me. I turned, and there it was again, red and shiny, sitting perfectly in the center of the room. I didn't sleep that night. I returned home the next morning, running on caffeine and fear. The house felt wrong the moment I walked in, too cold, too still. The air was thick, heavy with a stench that reminded me of the hospital. I tried to ignore it, heading straight to my bedroom. I hadn't slept in days, and my body was screaming for rest. But the moment I opened the door, I froze. The walls were covered in writing, the same jagged scrawl I'd seen in the children's ward. "Stay with us. Don't leave. We're lonely." The ball sat in the middle of my bed. I stumbled back, slamming the door shut. My hands trembled as I grabbed my phone, my first instinct to call someone, anyone, but the screen was static, flickering with garbled images. For a brief moment, I saw their faces, hollow-eyed children, mouths stretched into two wide smiles, staring at me through the cracked glass. And then my phone went dark. I've tried everything to get rid of the ball. I drove to the woods and buried it beneath a tree, digging with my bare hands until my nails bled. When I got back to the house, it was sitting on the kitchen counter. I threw it into a river, watching it sink into the murky depths. That night, it was on my pillow when I tried to sleep. I even set it on fire. Flames licked at the plastic, curling its surface into blackened, bubbling lumps. But when the fire burned out, the ball was whole again, untouched, sitting in the center of the ashes. The whispers are getting worse. They come at all hours now, faint at first, then growing louder until they echo through the house. They speak in unison, a chorus of voices weaving together like a sinister lullaby. "We're waiting," they say. I've started seeing them. Shadows darting in the corners of my vision, small shapes moving just out of reach. At night, I feel them watching me, their cold breath on my neck as I lie awake, too terrified to close my eyes. Yesterday, I found footprints, small, muddy prints leading from the front door to my bedroom. I scrubbed them away, but this morning, they were back, multiplied, trailing across the entire house. I don't think I'm safe anymore. The final straw came tonight. I was sitting in the living room, staring at the ball, trying to gather the courage to destroy it again. The whispers were louder than ever, filling the house with their eerie, sing-song cadence. Then my phone rang. The screen was blank, but I answered anyway. "We're coming," the voice on the other end said. It was a child's voice, soft but dripping with malice. The line went dead, and the lights flickered out. The house plunged into darkness, the whispers swelling into a deafening roar. And then I heard them, footsteps, small and shuffling, coming up the stairs. They're here now. I can hear them outside my door, their tiny hands scratching at the wood. I don't know how much longer I can hold on. If anyone reads this, don't go to St. Malachi Asylum. Don't pick up anything you find there. And whatever you do, don't look for me. Because I don't think I'll ever leave. I write this now with trembling hands, the dim glow of the monitor my only light. Outside my door, the scratching has stopped, replaced by a new sound, breathing. Slow, shallow, and impossibly close. I've shoved furniture against the door, but I know it's a futile gesture. Whatever is out there, it doesn't need an open door to get in. They came for me last night. I was huddled on the floor, clutching a kitchen knife I'd grabbed in a panic. The whispers surrounded me, growing louder until I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Then came the creak of the floorboards, the sound of small, bare feet moving closer. The lights flickered back on, and for a moment, I thought I was alone. But as I turned my head, I saw them, dozens of them, crowded into the corners of the room, their bodies pale and thin, their hollow eyes fixed on me. I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. All I could do was stare as they stepped closer, their movements jerky, as though they weren't used to their own limbs. One of them broke away from the group, a small girl with dark, matted hair and a smile that stretched too wide across her face. She tilted her head, her empty eyes boring into mine. "Stay with us," she whispered, her voice echoing with unnatural harmony. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was desperation, or maybe I was just too terrified to think straight. But I screamed, raising the knife, and slashed at her. The blade passed through her as though she weren't there. Her form flickered, distorting like an old videotape, but her smile never wavered. The others laughed, a high-pitched, bone-chilling sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. They surged forward, their hands reaching for me, their fingers cold and brittle like old porcelain. I stumbled backward, falling onto the couch, and then... nothing. They vanished, leaving behind only silence and the faint scent of mildew. I didn't sleep after that. How could I? I sat in the corner of the living room, my back pressed to the wall, staring at the ball. It sat in the middle of the floor, untouched, its red surface glinting faintly in the dim light. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke to the sound of whispering. But this time, it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from inside my head. They're inside me now. I can feel them, crawling beneath my skin, filling my thoughts with their voices. They tell me things, horrible, unspeakable things. They show me visions of the hospital, of rooms filled with screams and shadows, of bodies crumpled on the floor like discarded dolls. I tried to leave again today. I don't know why I thought it would work. The front door opened easily this time, the sunlight spilling into the foyer like a promise of salvation. But as soon as I stepped outside, I knew I'd made a mistake. The world was wrong. The sky was a sickly gray, the trees twisted and blackened as though burned. The street was empty, devoid of sound or movement, except for the faint whispers that seemed to follow me wherever I went. I ran, my feet pounding against the cracked pavement, but no matter how far I went, I always ended up back at the house. Its windows stared at me like hollow eyes, its doors swinging open as if to welcome me home. I'm trapped. I don't know how long it's been since this started. Days? Weeks? Time doesn't feel real anymore. The ball is in my hands now, though I don't remember picking it up. Its surface is cold, almost wet, and when I press my ear to it, I can hear them whispering. Soon, they say. The house feels smaller every day, the walls closing in around me. I've stopped eating. Stopped drinking. The hunger doesn't matter anymore, it's drowned out by the voices, by the whispers that never stop. I saw my reflection in the mirror this morning. I hardly recognized myself. My skin is pale, my eyes sunken, and there's something wrong with my smile. It's too wide. Too sharp. Just like theirs. I think I know what they want now. They want me to stay, to become one of them. And I'm starting to think that maybe I already have. If anyone finds this, don't look for me. Don't come to the house. And whatever you do, don't pick up the ball. Because once you do, they'll never let you go. The ball is gone. I don't know how or when it disappeared, but when I woke up this morning, it wasn't there. For the first time in what feels like weeks, the whispers have stopped, and the house is silent. Too silent. I ventured outside again, desperate for fresh air, for proof that I hadn't completely unraveled. The sky was still that ashen gray, the air heavy and still, but something was different. The house was no longer looming behind me, waiting to pull me back. For the first time, I felt free. I wandered for hours, following streets I didn't recognize, passing rows of identical houses that all seemed to blur together. The world felt hollow, like a stage set abandoned by its cast. Then I saw it. a child standing at the end of the road. She was small, her hair dark and tangled, and she clutched something in her hands. Something red. The ball. She turned to me, her hollow eyes meeting mine, and she smiled. It wasn't the wide, grotesque grin I'd come to fear, it was soft, almost sweet. But it was wrong. Everything about her was wrong. "Come play," she said, her voice like a distant echo. She tossed the ball toward me, and it rolled to a stop at my feet. I don't know why I picked it up. Maybe I thought I could end this once and for all. Maybe I thought I could reason with her, with them. But the moment my fingers closed around the ball, the whispers returned. "Good," they said. "It's time." The world twisted around me, bending and warping until I was no longer standing on the street. I was back in the hospital. St. Malachi Asylum. The walls dripped with mold and something darker, and the air was heavy with the stench of decay. But this time, it wasn't empty. They were there, dozens of them, children with hollow eyes and too wide smiles, their thin limbs twitching as they crept closer. They surrounded me, their whispers overlapping in a deafening cacophony. "You're one of us now," they said. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "I'm not. I'm not." The girl stepped forward, her smile fading. "You are," she said, her voice cold and final. "You've been ours since you touched the ball." I tried to run, but the floor shifted beneath me, the tiles cracking and crumbling into darkness. I fell, the shadows swallowing me whole, and for a moment I thought it was over. But it wasn't. I woke up in the children's ward, lying on one of the rusted beds. The walls were blank now, the scrawled words replaced by a smooth, featureless surface. The room was silent, the air heavy and still. And I wasn't alone. The girl stood at the foot of the bed, holding the ball. "It's your turn," she said, tossing it to me. I caught it reflexively, my fingers curling around the cold, wet surface. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice shaking. Her smile returned, wide and unnatural. "You'll see. I don't know how long I've been here. Days, weeks, maybe longer. The whispers are gone now, but I can feel them watching me, their eyes always just out of sight. The ball is in my hands, its surface warm and pulsing, like it's alive. The walls of the hospital shift and change, rooms appearing and disappearing at random. Sometimes I see others, people like me, their faces pale and hollow, their eyes filled with the same fear I feel. But they never speak. They never stay. I think I'm becoming like them. If you're reading this, it's too late for me. I'm part of this place now, just another whisper in the shadows. But if you find the ball, if you see it, run. Burn it. Bury it. Do whatever you can to destroy it. Because once it finds you, there's no escaping. And soon, it will be your turn. I thought I understood the rules. The whispers, the ball, the shifting walls, I thought they were the limits of this nightmare. But the hospital is changing. It's alive. And it's hungry. I woke up to find the ball gone again. At first, I felt relief. Maybe it was finally over. But as I stepped out of the room, I realized the halls were different. The peeling wallpaper and crumbling tiles were gone, replaced by smooth, pulsating walls that seemed to breathe. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and something metallic, like blood. I walked cautiously, my footsteps echoing in the silence. The hallway seemed endless, stretching far beyond what I remembered. Doors appeared and disappeared, flickering in and out of existence like a glitching video. I tried one at random, but it opened into a black void, the sound of faint whispers rising from within. "Stay," the voices said. "Stay with us." I slammed the door shut and kept moving, my heart pounding in my chest. The whispers followed me, growing louder with every step, until they weren't just whispers anymore, they were screams. The children are different now. They're no longer just shadows in the corners of my vision. They're solid, real, and they're everywhere. Their hollow eyes follow me as I walk, their two wide smiles splitting their faces. They don't speak anymore, but their presence is enough. And then there's the girl. She appears when I least expect it, always holding the ball, her dark hair hanging in tangled strands over her pale face. She doesn't smile anymore. She just stares, her empty eyes boring into me like she's waiting for something. I found a room today that wasn't like the others. The walls were covered in jagged scrawls, phrases overlapping until they were barely legible. It never ends. You can't leave. It's already too late. In the center of the room was a mirror, cracked and covered in grime. I approached it cautiously, my reflection flickering in and out of focus. When I wiped away the dirt, my stomach twisted. It wasn't me staring back. The face in the mirror was pale and gaunt, the eyes hollow and dark. Its mouth twisted into a smile that stretched too wide, its teeth sharp and jagged. I stumbled back, but the reflection stayed, watching me. It raised a hand, and so did I, but the movements weren't mine. They were too slow, too deliberate. You're almost ready, it whispered, its voice cold and rasping. Just a little longer. I turned and ran, the sound of its laughter echoing behind me. The hospital is shrinking. The walls are closing in, the hallways narrowing until I can barely move. The whispers are louder now, a constant drone in my ears that drowns out my thoughts. The children are everywhere, their hollow eyes and too wide smiles haunting my every step. And the ball is back. It sits in the middle of the hall, glowing faintly in the dim light. I don't want to touch it, but I can feel it pulling me, calling to me. When I pick it up, the walls shudder, and the whispers stop. For a moment, there's silence. Then the girl appears, her eyes fixed on mine. It's time, she says, her voice cold and final. I don't know what they've done to me. My body doesn't feel like my own anymore. My limbs are stiff, my skin pale and cold. When I look into the mirror, the thing staring back at me is no longer a stranger. It's me. And it's smiling. If you find this, know that I didn't survive. I didn't escape. I'm part of this place now, just another whisper in the halls, another face in the shadows. The hospital will call to you. It always does. And when it does, you won't be able to resist. Because St. Malachi Asylum doesn't just take, it transforms. And soon, it'll be your turn.